So I'm going to show you an exercise, and I'm not really sure why it works, but let's not worry too much about that part of it at this stage. But what I've been giving to groups is this proposition, and it's not a real proposition, it's a play proposition, but it seems to have good effect. So what I propose is that we're going to get up and down off the floor, and we're going to do that for 5 minutes. And there are 2 rules. The first one is we want to get down at least half the speed that we normally get up and down at. In other words, we're going to do it slower. And number 2, is we want to try and explore ways of getting up and down that we don't usually do. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. And as I said, this is a new exercise, and so I can't predict that this is going to be universally reproducible with everyone at all times, because it may turn out that it varies a lot. But so let's kick that off. So you can certainly use hands if you want to, coming down. A tendency might be, there's a rule that we don't have hands. No, the rules are just do it in a different way to how you would normally get up and down. And just giving yourself time is really for your body. It's giving your body time to feel where it's at, and to feel what feels good and what doesn't feel good. So, which is a rare thing. It's an exercise that helps us unprogram ourselves from working in that automatic pilot mode, which we're all probably fairly familiar with. So that if you ask most of us at any point in time, well, what do you want? So that's often not a terribly easy question to answer. So we're giving ourselves time here to unlock from that programming and just drop into our body, so our body can figure out what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And we're going to go with those lovely positions and movements that actually feel good, and it's going to be, those movements are going to be different for every single person, which is another sign that we're getting out of that programming that we think defines who we are, when really that all that programming is a substitute for what we really are, and it's a substitute for our own direct personal experience. And working according to pleasure gets us right back into direct experience itself, which is where we want to be. That's our dimension of learning, and that's our dimension where suddenly we become aware of relationships between our body and our surroundings, and all those beautiful interactive oppositional forces. And it's through that interaction that we find ourselves. It's through interaction with our surroundings that we find that sense of pleasure and experience, that self-awareness that comes from just experiencing ourselves and experiencing sensations. That is the territory of no programming. Now, it's interesting because when I've given this task, and your groups might be different, and it might have something to do with me modelling it this way when I'm doing it with them, but the initial task set is not actually fulfilled, because people start to find all these lovely sensations and they just want to float off down that river of sensation and experience, which keeps them exploring. And when you think of it, the closer you are to the floor, there is much more oppositional interactivity, there's much more richness of sensation available to us. So, it's feeling really good. This is feeling really good for me today, because I haven't been terribly well this last week, and It's just, and I'm feeling quite clogged up, so this is just so relieving. Beautiful. Now, let's just keep going. And this is a lovely, this is floor relationship exercise. This is all part of our floor relationship series of videos. This is at its most pure, okay? Like I said, there is no programming, there is just you and the floor and the experience you're having through that relationship of you with the floor. There is just nothing but discovery going on rather than being programmed into modes of behaviour. We are directing that behaviour according to our own experience of what feels good and what doesn't feel good. Okay. So again, when we're thinking a little bit technically here, thinking where is all this sensation coming from? It's coming from interactivity. And what defines that interactivity? It's always an interaction of forces meeting other forces oppositionally. This is where we derive our experience. And through experience we develop this sense of what we call ourselves. Who we are, what makes us the way we are, as opposed to what makes my friend standing next to me who they are. What makes my experience unique. So a little bit of pain in there, but enough to keep me interested because there's a bit of pleasure there. But over here, that is so rich with pleasure here. So let's explore this a little bit more here. So, pretty well rule of thumb, the more pleasure that is where the main game is. And this even goes for rehab. You may say, well, okay, what about those parts of my body that do not feel pleasure? You know, should I just leave them alone? Well, that's a great question that we could have quite a lot of discussion around. But coming back to the idea of a connected body, whatever you do for the parts of your body that feel good is going to have an influence right through, via connections through your body, to those bits that aren't doing quite so well. What you find with rehab is if you don't look after the parts of your body that are functional, the unfunctioning parts will drag those functioning parts into a state of dysfunction as well. So it's very important to keep those functioning parts feeling as good as you can, and they will tend to have a positive influence on the dysfunctional parts. It's like you're throwing those dysfunctioning parts a lifeline that they can grasp and find connection and find a way out of dysfunction. Okay, now let's just come back to our little fantasy exercise and think, okay, well, how about getting up out of this position? Let's just keep moving. And one little tip here is if you ever find that working this way, you're sort of getting bored, your sensations aren't actually being enriched by this interaction, what you'll commonly find is if you ask yourself the question, where in my body do I have my attention right now? So for example, for me, it's mostly in my arms and my right leg. So assuming that this position was no longer becoming very interesting to me, which it is actually, but all I would have to do is draw my attention to the parts of my body where there is no attention. So it will be into this side of my body. So in my case, I'm just going to start giving that a bit of attention, and that by itself is going to propel me into some new sensations that were completely in a blind spot to me. So that's a little really simple handy trick for, again, working against this programming of not being familiar enough with our own bodies and our own senses to be open enough for them to guide us and for them to inform us, which shows in the habitual way that people hold themselves. You know, you stand up a group of, say, 10 people, and each of us has a habitual posture and a habitual way to move, and that habitual posture and movement has its corollaries in our emotional state and our mental state. So the way to get out of those repetitious ruts in our programming, all we have to do is, it's really quite simple. It's just ask ourselves where our attention is, which will be the program, and all we have to do is say, well, what's not in the program? And in other words, go with physical exercise, go to the parts of your body that aren't included in the program. And that will lead you out of your program into all that territory that has been occluded. And it will bring us back into that realm of experience rather than program. Beautiful. Good. So I'm thinking, at least I'm thinking about getting off the floor now, which is hard because, like I said, there's a strong pull, which is a good pull. It's a good pull to stay down here because it's so on a sensory level, it is so rich with sensations down here. That's it. Okay. So I don't want to get up because it feels so good down here. And this is what you have to experience. You can't, I can't teach you this, obviously. This is something that I cannot program you into. It's all about getting down into your own experience to unprogram yourselves. Good. I just want to bring that leg back there because there's something really good in there for me. This is too good. I don't want to get up at all. I never want to get up. I just want to stay down here. So rather than fear the floor, which is typical, and it is a fear. I mean, it needs to be named as a fear. People who, a chap I know, he and his wife bought a new car, which was just which was just a regular hyped car. It was a Toyota Corolla. And he sold it about a year later, and I said, I haven't seen your car about for a while. And he said, yeah, we sold it. He's a chap, he and his wife were in their 60s. We sold it because it was too hard getting down into it and getting up. And also I had a chance to meet a lady who again was in her 60s, and she said, oh yeah, I have to get rid of my couch because it's too low, it's too hard for me to get down into. Okay? These fears are unfounded. They are unfounded. And the way you can discover that is to just do this exercise. Do the fantasy 5-minute get up and down off the floor exercise and see how hard it is to get back up once you're down. See how hard it is. And see for yourselves whether this boogeyman of, the floor, do anything to avoid getting on the floor. Get yourself a higher bed, get yourself a higher car, get yourself a higher chair. Just try this exercise and you'll see everything that you're missing out on. So nothing I'm doing is from any prescription that I can think of. Some of the movements I'm noticing I'm going to fairly classical form movements, but that's not what I'm being led from. It's just being led from a feeling of total guidance from pleasure. Pleasure is the confirmation that our bodies are doing what is necessary for them to do in order to function at their optimum. Pleasure, certainly from a very early age, through studies, has been shown to form the basis for relationship bonding throughout life. From a child development point of view, things like breastfeeding, it's not just the nutritional value and the immune system and so forth. It's all the skin contact, it's the eye contact, it's the sense of pleasure involved, which is considered extremely important for the ability of a person throughout life to form meaningful bonding, affectionate relationships. So again, pleasure is our main compass that we need to come back to as confirmation, not just of, as I said, as confirmation that our bodies are moving towards being more functional, but also pleasure is so important in terms of being able to calibrate ourselves in ways that are optimum for human relationships. So I don't think I'm going to get up. So please play with this exercise, the fantasy 5-minute get up and down exercise, and please just see where it leads. All oppositional movements, again, we've got to keep coming back to that theme that this is all self-discovery through oppositional movement. It's our interaction of our bodies relating to the oppositional incoming force of the floor, and through all the leverage systems through my body. So if I want to project this part of my body forward, what's happening, you can't see with the camera here, but my lower back is arching backwards in the other direction to open this up. And it's immensely pleasurable, which is my confirmation that all kinds of stresses are being dealt with, and that my body is reaching a greater state of connection, which is more optimum for not only my survival through life, but my thriving through life.